Hello everyone, this is Al Fadi, and thank you so much for joining us in this video series on the Quran and its ahruf and qiraat. Last time, Dr. Jay Smith, with me here in studio, mentioned something really interesting at the end. He kind of like issued a challenge to anyone to show him a Quran that is a 7th century Quran, written before 652, and the date, of course, has to do with Uthmanic collection, that this particular Quran, if found, will match the Quran that we have in our hand today. And it has the same number of basically chapters or surahs, 114, and the list can go on and on and on. Now, here's an interesting thing that I would like to bring up to the table today. Even if you find something like this, the question is, are you going to find a Quran that could be read in the exact same way as we read it today? And Dr. J, we're going to talk about the diacritical variants.
Okay. Back in the 7th century, what we do know is that there were just skeletal consonantal texts. Let's look at this slide here, and let's take a look at this one here. In fact, I want to show you these two pages from two different manuscripts. On the left is the Samarkand manuscript. On the right is the Sanaa manuscript. You know all about that one on the right, don't you?
That's right. And you know what? As someone who's been looking at these manuscripts a lot, and other manuscripts, like for instance the Samarkand, I have the entire, basically copies or images of these folios available to me. Even as an Arab speaker, I can assure you, by looking at it alone, you won't be able to tell every single word sometimes. You have to be careful.
For you to read that, of course, it's very small print right here, but if the ones that are on your computer, you pull them up, you enlarge them. For you to read it would be very difficult. And why would it be difficult to read it?
It will be difficult if you don't have something to check against, and that's where the problem lies. You know, I remember, I think it was Adnan Rashid. Is it? I think Adnan Rashid, his full name. I just want to make sure I'm respectful. I'm not butchering
Adnan
his
Rashid
name.
is his name. He's a good friend. I've known him for about 20 years.
So Adnan Rashid, I think the other day, I think he was with even Brother Farid, and what he was doing is he's looking at the, Birmingham folios, and he's saying, oh, praise God, look, we have the exact same thing in the Birmingham folios as it is in our today's Quran. But here's the problem. He was looking at today's Quran and reading it that way. Without today's Quran, you won't be able to tell how you pronounce certain words.
Yeah.
And that's, like there are some words like Allah, you can tell right away, this is Allah. Okay, I can read that word. Maybe this is min, maybe this is wow. But to be careful and try to say this is exactly the same way, that's where we get into the different qiraat.
Okay,
that's
now you're kind of going over the head of a lot of people that are watching. There's an awful lot of people who did not understand the last 5 minutes. And the reason why is, take a look at it again. What is it that's missing in these two pictures?
And that's why we're talking about the diacritical marks.
And what is that? What do you mean diacritical? That's a big word.
Basically, you have a letter. In this case, we're using the Arabic letter. And by virtue of the location of certain dots or marks on them, you'll be able to read it and pronounce it correctly.
Okay, let's do that. Let's go into the next slide and let's look at the alphabet. Now, here is today's current alphabet. This is what you have in modern standard Arabic. And there, as you see, there are 28 letters there. Correct. However, take a look. Of those 28 letters, 6 of them, or 7 of them, let's say 7 of them, do not, no, 6 of them. Some say 7, some say 7. I'm going to go with 6, okay? These are the 6 that do not need any dots. And the first one is what?
Alif.
Next one?
Kaf.
Next one?
Lam.
Next one?
Mim.
Next one?
Ha.
Next one?
Wow.
So those are the 6 that are circled in yellow. Those do not need any dots.
Right.
All the other 22, however, 22 of them do, don't they? Which means the vast majority. So for some scholars, it depends on which scholars you're talking to. Some scholars say that in the 7th century, there were really only 16 letters, 16 skeletal letters.
Yeah. And I want you to just leave this for a second here in front of everybody. Folks, look at the letter to the left of Alif, way at the top. You see how many other letters look almost the same, but the different location of the dots?
So the ba, the ta, and the tha.
That's right. The same thing with the one right after the tha, the jim. Look, the jim, the ha, and the ha. Looks almost the same. You have the da and the thal. The same. Ra, za. The same. Sin, sheen. The same. Sa. You see, we have some problems here if you don't know the location of these dots.
Let's just look at one letter. Yeah. Let's just do it. Let's just take a smiley face. I like to call it a smiley face, okay? Right. It's one of the most constant of letters. And remember, in every word you always have 3 letters for its root. A root of the Arabic word is always 3 letters, and that's
three
why
radicals, exactly.
3 radicals, they call them. And when you go into a dictionary, you always go to the third person singular because that's the root for every major word, for every word that's in the dictionary. So let's just look at one of those letters. What happens when you put 1 dot above it?
Above it, it will be nun.
Which is like the N in English.
That's right.
Okay? What about 2 dots above it?
Ta, like the letter T.
Like the letter T, okay? What about 3 dots above it?
Th, which is the letter like TH.
The the, okay?
Yeah.
So those already, just by putting 3 different dots, you get 3 different letters. Nun, ta, and tha, right?
That's right.
But it's more than that. You can actually get more than that. Let's then take that same smiley face, and now let's put 1 dot below it.
That's ba.
Which is like the B.
Yeah.
Okay? 2 dots?
Yeah, like
the Y.
Y.
Like the Y
for instance,
sound.
that's
Okay?
one example.
So here you can get 2 more letters on that dot, just with that same smiley face. So really, when you look at them, we'll put them up. Their first one, na, ta, tha, ba, ya. Ooh, tu, 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 tu. There you get 5 different letters, 5 different dots. These did not exist in the 7th century, which means you have 5 different variations on just one smiley face, and we're not even looking at the vowels yet.
That's right.
Because what are the 3 vowels?
The Arabic vowels here?
Yeah, the dhamma, the kasra, and what are they? What are the sounds they make?
Dhamma is like it adds basically, the way you pronounce something.
It'd be like an oo sound.
Exactly. So you say.
And the fatha, what would that sound be?
Fatha is like it will, open the way you say something. Like for instance, you say ta. That's almost like saying something with a fatha. Ta.
So
if I would put a dhamma, two, and
then the kasra would be
t.
Okay, so it's the a, the u, the a, and the e sound.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 vowels, and they're the short ones. And then we know there's
That's
also long ones. So really, we're talking about 5 dots and 3 vowels, and that did not exist in the 7th century.
That's right.
At least entirely. There were some cases that you have come up with that may show some dots beginning in the 7th century.
And that's why we see some manuscript, you find like the scribes will go back to older one and they start adding these dots to make it easier to read.
Okay, now let's take the same exercise we've just done, and let's put 3 of these smiley faces together. What happens? When you put 3 smiley faces together, you can get, and let's go on the slide there, you can get as many as 19 different words.
At least.
At least. Because you have found even more than this, haven't you?
You could come up with more. It depends on how creative you want to be with these basically words and dots and diacritical marks.
It could be house, or it sprouted, or stayed over, or a girl or daughter, she built, stood firm, grew, we repent, he repents, she repents. It could be he spreads, or he broadcasts, she does it, or we do it. He fixed, she destroyed, we destroyed, you destroyed, it was destroyed, or I repented.
Yeah, and the word, for instance, for grew, right there, as you can see it over there, which is nebata, I can make it a verb and say nebata, meaning cause to grow. I mean, you can make it a verb, just by adding, dhamma, shadda, things like that. In this case, the shadda basically helped with that. And now it sounds like a verb versus a noun, for instance.
Can you then understand why the Arabic, these earliest manuscripts that didn't have any of these dots, didn't have any of these vowels, could be really read many, many different ways, depending on who decided to put what dots, what vowels where.
Yeah.
And that is the beginning of the Qiraat and Ahruf Conundrum.
Absolutely. And, again, back again to the verbs. The word for grew, nabata, that's in past tense. You can make it imperative, nabata. That's an imperative, So a lot of things can change here. And this is why, for instance, we have some readings say qul, others will say qal, right?
He
big
said or
difference.
Say.
Exactly.
Imperative. Yeah. Grew or grow. You do it. Grow. So you're right. Imperative, for people who don't know, means it's a command.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating that with that kind of freedom, and anybody then reading the text that had no dots, and then suddenly the dots are there, you're going to put the dots different places. Once you put dots with it, if you have 5 different possibilities with one smiley face, and then you have 3 letters next together, so that gets you 15 different possibilities. To say nothing of the vowels, the dhamma, the kasra, and the fatha. You can imagine the variations, the variety, the main enormous amount of freedom you have to put dots and vowels. Depending on what you think the context is, you're going to get lots of different variants, and that's what the Qiraat and the ahruf difficulties are.
That's correct. And I'm going to close, but I want to go out on a limb here, Dr. J. It is for reasons like this that even if you find a 7th century complete Quran, you're not going to find one with this system, because this was added later from Islamic own sources. They tell us that was added later. But here's the thing. It is becoming more and more obvious, forensically speaking, that the issue, the conundrum of Qiraat existed at a later time, and you have a tradition like Bukhari's trying to take it back to the days of the Prophet to make sense of it. It is because of the lack of these dots that the different Qiraat existed, the different readings, and Bukhari had to come to the rescue by making a claim of something that happened at the time of the Prophet that justifies these things.
Without thinking and knowing and understanding that he cannot make that claim. We're going to get to that later on in one of the episodes when we look at that claim, because people are not thinking through. This claim makes no sense in the 7th century. It makes all the sense in the 9th century when it was written.
Exactly.
But not in the 7th century.
And it makes sense that immediately after, Ibn Mujahid came in to try to canonize it, because there was a lot of them already. Yeah. So which ones were revealed, and he has to come to the rescue as well.
Good man.
Yeah.
All right.
Today, I believe you are going to address what you'd called the 30 variant Qurans. And as you know, if I would have been a Muslim right now, I would have been shocked to hear you say there is 30. Yeah, I would have been shocked to hear you say there is 2 different Qurans.
Yeah, and I can understand. And this is something that I feel sorry for a lot of Muslims who are watching. This may be a shock for many of them. This is understandable. If you've been told this one narrative, and this is what the only thing you've ever been permitted to be told, this is the only thing you're not permitted to question. You just believe there is only one Quran, and all the Qurans are exactly the same words, same letters, has never changed since the time of Uthman or the time of Muhammad, and the same that is in heaven. Now suddenly to realize, hold on a minute, there's more than one Quran. We're talking about 30 official Qurans. What 30 are we talking about? Let's go to the slide, and let's look at the slide here. Here's your slide, and this is straight out of Wikipedia. Anybody can get it. So I'm not making this up. Anybody can go up to Wikipedia, and you will see this list here. Not in this color, because I've color-coded them so that to help you understand. Because I understand that some of this will go over the head of many people, so we want to really dumb it down to make it as simple as possible. Let's look at the first 7 on the left in green. Look at those green ones there.
So if you don't mind me just telling people, the left column are the original supposedly readers. The last 2 are what we call the transmitters.
The transmitters, the narrators, the students, the rawis.
Right.
This is the riwayat. Now, let's go to the left. Let's look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Nafi from Medina, Ibn Kathir from Mecca, Abu Amr from Basra, Ibn Amir from Damascus, Asim from Kufa, Hamza from Kufa, Al-Kasai from Kufa. So 3 from Kufa, 1 from Damascus, 1 from Basra, 1 from Mecca, and 1 from Medina, which seems to suggest Kufa is pretty important.
That's right, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? You should see Mecca's name and Medina
They should all be
more
from
often.
Mecca, Medina.
Exactly.
Every one of them should be from Mecca, Medina to be Qurayshi. Only 2 of them are from Mecca, Medina. The other 5 are from the wrong cities. They're from the wrong areas. We'll be getting to that. We'll be unpacking that later on. Who are the one that chose this guy? Look and see who chose them. The guy in black right below them, Ibn Mujahid.
Absolutely.
Now here we need to look at the dates, and we will be putting this on a timeline in other episodes, but just for now to introduce this, take a look at the dates. You can see for Nafi, he died in 785, Ibn Kathir 738, Abu Amr 770, Ibn Amir 736. Let me just look right here, and this is Ibn Amir right here. This is the guy right here we're talking about. And he is Ibn Amir, 736. He is the earliest. What's interesting is those were all chosen by Ibn Mujahid. What is his date? Look and see what his date is. 936.
Muhammad died in 632.
So we're talking about 300 years later.
At least.
So these were not even chosen for another 300 years after Muhammad.
And let's stop here. In 652, didn't Uthman also supposedly collect the Quran in a Qurayshi dialect and burned the other readings?
Burned all of them. If you look at those 7 that are there, these are the 7 of the most important. 5 of them are from the areas that Uthman burned. They should not be in that list.
That's true.
What are they doing there?
That is true.
Now, there's 3 more. Look at the red ones. Go back. Look at the red ones. Go back to that slide
3
again.
more canonical readings. That's what
Canonical readings that were added to
mentioned.
the 7, and that's Abu Ja'far from Medina, Yaqub from Basra, and Khalaf from Kufa. Chosen by whom? Chosen by Al-Jazari. Look at his dates, 1429.
That's, folks, 700 to 800 years after the time of Muhammad. 15th century. Muhammad died in the 7th century.
We're almost 800 years later. Those 3 are chosen. Now, when you look at those 10, what's missing there? What name's missing?
Under the readers, Hafs is the one that is missing.
Because Hafs is the one. Here's the Hafs. This is the Hafs that we use all the
That's
time.
the commonly used, the
This is the one-
1924 edition.
This is the 1920. This is the official canonical text since 1985, made official by King Fahd himself. It's known as the Fahd edition. It's known as Hafs, as the guy that actually wrote the Arabic. In 796, he died. His name's not on that list, is he? He's not one of the readers.
That's right.
So there was a problem because there were so many of these starting to proliferate in the 8th, 9th, and 10th century that Ibn Mujahid in the 10th century had to choose 2 more from every one of these 7 readers. And that's in the purple. Let's go put up the slide again. You can see the names. There's 2 different columns. They're starting with Qalun and Warsh. They were the readers or the narrators. I'm sorry, not the readers, the transmitters or the narrators or the rawis underneath Nafi. Al-Bazi and Kunbul are from Ibn Kathir. And we're going to get into this in more depth, so I don't want to go through all the names right now.
Right.
But I want to show you where Hafs is. There is Hafs there. Hafs suddenly appears. He is from Asim, and he is from Kufa. That's going to be problematic. That we'll be talking about later. But so he is not even one of the official readers. He is nothing more than a narrator. He's nothing more than a student, as you call them.
That's right. And again, the idea, here is what's so interesting, is like you're told all the time, these are their students, and you think, oh, the student, of course, I'm passionate about my teacher. I want to be with them. I want to learn from them. They mentor me. And that's why I want to carry on their legacy.
And you want to carry on their writing.
That's right.
You would write the same thing they wrote, right?
But what we're finding out is these guys are even
They have
days
hundreds.
later,
They have thousands.
they couldn't
of
have lived with their teachers.
And they not only are they not from the same century, many of them, they never knew their readers. They didn't even follow what their readers were writing.
Yep,
But
and that's
that's
why
good.
you have multiple ones.
That's why we're gonna. That's
Yeah.
why we're gonna get. Now I just want to show you the next slide. Let's go back to the slides again. And here is the 23, or the 23 that Bernie Powers has now collected down in Australia. He was on the live stream with me a few weeks ago there at Fander Films.
Right.
He has spent, and his team have spent an enormous amount of time, I don't know how many years, going through these 23 and unpacking. But specifically, they have looked at the Warsh and the Hafs. We're going to be getting that to that later in another episode to see what they have found between these two. So I'm just going to look at the 26. As I put them up, why don't you just go ahead and read them, because I'm going to desecrate the Arabic.
We'll read a few of them.
Okay.
We don't have to read all.
So there's the first one.
So this one basically Riwayat Susi.
Okay.
This one Riwayat Hafs an Asim, basically Abi Ja'far.
Okay. So and he is actually a reader.
Yeah. Here Qiraat Yaqub.
Okay. Let's go to this guy.
Yeah. This one is Duri.
He's not the only one. There's another one of his coming up.
And you have a Basri in there as well. You have Ibn Amir in here. Here we have Khalaf, basically, عن طريق الدرة. You have Al-Layth ibn Khalid and Warsh and Nafi' طريق الأزرق.
And here's another Warsh.
That's an
Asbahani way.
Asbahani. Here we have Riwayat Ibn Wardan. We have Ibn Jammaz in there. Duri here. I mean, there's so many of them. Riwayat Khalaf an Hamza. Al-Kisai.
He's a reader.
Right?
Shu'bah.
Shu'bah.
He is a narrator.
Yeah, Ibn Kathir.
Hisham.
Right? Hisham ibn Ammar.
Al-Bazi.
Ibn Kathir, one more time.
There's Khalaf there.
Right. So
Shu'bah.
So
Shu'bah I have here in this list
I think
here.
people get the idea that we have so many because the so-called students also disagreed or at least deviated from the reading of their readers. That's why you have multiple times the same name pops up with different narrator.
And here's Qalun. So those are the 26. These are the 26 that we held up back there in 2016 where Muhammad Hijab had his. Now we want to move into the 8th century. And so what I'd like to do is go back to the slides again and let's start going on to the 8th century because now we get into the Qiraat. And there you see we start with Muhammad who dies in 632. We now know, we've already gone through this, so I'm not doing anything you haven't already seen. And then you get to Uthman, who then introduces the one Quran. So from 632 of the 7 Qurans, it comes back to one Quran in 652, 20 years later. But hold on, where are these 7 ahrufs? Where are these 7 Qiraats, or these 7 ahrufs that Muhammad received? Well, we're told that 5 of them were actually created from one ahruf, one Qiraat, and that's into 5 cities. But aren't there more dialects? Shabir Ali keeps on talking about the ones that were actually destroyed, the ones that were burned by our good friend Uthman, were dialects. You destroyed dialects. And he was trying to say these are recitations. No, these aren't recitations. You don't burn recitation. You don't, as we've said many times, you don't burn people's tongues. Now, suddenly these Qiraats start to appear. And when do they appear? Well, let's look at the first one. There's the first one right up there. What's his name?
Ibn Amir.
Okay, and what is his date?
736. That's
So
at least the date when he died.
That's the day he died. That is not in the 7th century. So when we introduce the first of the Qiraat, the first derivation, the first of the dots and the vowels, and it's this guy right here, and I'll just pull him off the table that we have in front of us. Oops, that falls off. You can hold him up, but there he is.
Yep, that's it.
Ibn Amir. So that's 736. That's the earliest. That is introduced in the, beginning of the 8th century, but well into the 8th century, 736, and it's certainly 100 years after Muhammad. So he did not live at the time of Muhammad, right?
Oh, absolutely. No.
He did not even do his work in the same century as Muhammad, right?
If he lived at the days of a time of Muhammad, he would have been over 140 years of age.
That's right. You can see that. So obviously this has nothing to do with the earliest 7. Right. Because those 7 that were given to Jibril, by Jibril to Muhammad, were there before he died in 632. This is 100 years later. And he's the earliest. He's the earliest. That's why I have him on the timeline. Who comes second? Well, you have Ibn Kathir, who comes second, and he's in Mecca. His date is 738. Who comes third? Well, Asim. And he is from Kufa. So his date is 745. Who comes fourth? Abu Amr from Basra, 770. Now we're getting towards the end of the 8th century. Then comes Hamza, 772. Again, towards the end of the 8th century. Then you have Nafi from Medina, 785, almost getting to the end of the 8th century. And then finally we move into the 9th century and we have Al-Qasai. So those are the original 7. I put them up there so you can see them in the order of their dates that he died. Right. But there's the 7. Those are the 7, right?
Right.
And who chose those 7?
Ibn Mujahid.
Okay, and when... So let's look at Ibn Mujahid. What is his dates?
936.
Can you see? Look at the length between him and Muhammad.
It's really amazing, by the way, Jay, if you think about it. And I want our Muslim friends to hear me out here. Who decided which rasm, is the appropriate rasm and which dialect is the appropriate dialect? Uthman, who, by the way, we don't have any single tradition that says the Prophet authorized them, right, with anything like that. And then we move on to the Qiraat, 300 years later. Who authorized Ibn Mujahid to choose which 7 are the inspired ones that are preserved in heaven?
Interestingly, Ibn Mujahid would also agree with you. These are not inspired or in heaven. Right. At least you have to give him credit. He would not say that these are inspired. But what we do know is that he is the one that is given that authority to choose those 7. But those aren't the only authoritative one. There is some more. And
That's right.
And here is the first one. His name is Abu Ja'far, and he is from Medina. Then another one, Yaqub from Basra. Look at his dates, 821, so we're well into the 9th century. And finally, Khalaf from the mid-9th century. So now from 736 all the way up to 844, you have the official 10. That's the 10. 3 green, 7, 3
That's
green,
right.
Red.
And I hope people are noticing 5 from Kufa, 2 from Basra, 1 from Damascus, and then we only have 1 Mecca and 1 Medina.
And the ones well, actually, there's 3. Yeah, you have Abu Ja'far from Medina as well. So you have 2 from Medina and 1 from Mecca. Right. So those are the ones we should have. Those 3 should be the only ones of the 10. 7 of them have already been refuted, destroyed, and burned by our good friend Uthman. So why in the world do they suddenly appear a century later?
That's right.
Who chose them? Well, let's look and see who the guy who chose them. This guy chose them. Al-Jazari. 1429. I can't even get him on the map. I have to put an arrow saying where he is. He can't even get on the timeline. He's so far to the right.
So here's what it means. First of all, Uthman, we were told that he finally controlled the readings and the text. Yet by the time of Ibn Mujahid, we find that that's not the case. We still have more qira'at, and he has to deal with the problem. We thought that Ibn Mujahid fixed the problem. A couple of hundred years later, we have Al-Jazari dealing with other problems.
He gives another 3 on top of that. Now
right.
there's the 10. And these are the 10 that Yasir Qadhi talks about. These are the 10 that Shabir Ali talks about. These are the 10 that they keep on claiming are the creme de la creme, the best of the best. I've got that up there on the left. Yasir Qadhi has made this very clear that these are the 10 that we now know are from the time of Muhammad. And they
right.
keep on saying these are the divine 10. These are the ones we go to. You can see there's a problem, however, because what name is missing? Or what 2 names are missing? There are 2 names. Hafs and
Warsh.
Hafs and Warsh.
The most
Hafs and
common
Warsh
ones
should be
today.
the 2 most common ones.
Yeah.
These are the 2 that we use today. These are the 2 that everybody uses today. This is what used by 90% of the Muslim world. This is used all across North Africa. Yeah. Their names are not on this list, are they?
Not at all.
So when did these guys come to appear? Well, I'm going to show you what happened then. To begin with, Ibn Mujahid had enormous number of Qurans to choose from. And so he was given the responsibility to choose 2 narrators or 2 transmitters or 2 rawis from each one of these readers. So each reader he could choose 2. So what did he choose for Nafi? Well, he chose, so we have many more. So you have 2 from Nafi, you have Qalun and you have Warsh. Qalun is from Medina. Is Warsh from Medina? No, he's not. He's actually from Egypt. Why? We'll get into that. Then we have Ibn Kathir. He has Al-Baji. Look at his date, 864. And then you have Qunbul, 904. Now we're into the 10th century. 10th century. That's 250 years after Muhammad. Abu Amr has Al-Duri and he has Al-Susi. Again, these are 9th century. Ibn Amir has Hisham and Ibn Dakwan. Asim has Shuba, and there is Hafs. There comes Hafs, 796. Hamza has Khalaf and also Khalid, and then you have Al-Qasai. He has Al-Layth and Al-Duri again. Remember, Al-Duri is already up there with Abu Amr. He is also the same guy with Al-Qasai. He actually disagrees with himself and joins another reader, and actually
there
has
you go.
two different Qurans, the same guy.
Guy read 2 different ways. It's amazing, isn't it?
That's why he died on the same year, because he's the same individual. See, why aren't Muslims talking about this? How can you disagree with yourself because you join another school and then you have a completely different Quran again? You can't do that unless, of course, you are trying to get popularity for yourself.
Either this, or maybe he wasn't looking at it the way our Muslim friends are looking at it. He thought it was just fun to read it this way and learn to read it that way.
This or that. Up and on. You say potato, I say potato. You say tomato, I say tomato. It's much worse than that. We're not going to get into that. That'll be coming in another episode.
I think it's tomato.
I say it's tomato. Now we get to the other 3, the ones in the red, and they each are given 2 as well by Al-Jazari in 1429, the 15th century. So these are not appointed until the 15th century, almost 800 years after Muhammad. You have Isa ibn Wardan, and you also have Ibn Jumaz for Abu Jafar. Then you have Ruwai and you have Raw for Yaqub, and then you have Ishaq and Idris. Look at his dates, 905. That is the 10th century. So late. But chosen even later than that, 1429. So those are the 30 now. I want you to visually see that, folks. Look at visually and memorize that, because that's where they all come on a timeline.
And here's what Jay is saying. You have 10 readings, 2 transmitters for each. That's where we get the 30.
That's where you get the 3. Now, I want to go and I want to show you there. Go back to that. There's Hafs and Warsh. Those I've circled in black because they are the ones that are the most important. They are not part of the readers. They are part of the transmitters. They are nothing more than narrators.
Right. It's almost like you write a book and next generation somebody transmits your book. You should get the credit, not that transmitter.
And what's even more devastating, both Warsh and Hafs are not from Mecca. Even though Warsh is there with Nafi in Medina, he's not from Medina, he's from Egypt. He should have been a Coptic. It should have been a Coptic text. Now, I want to look at Abdul Malik again, because I want to look at comparison. When you look at Abdul Malik, you can see everything we're showing on that graph there, everything you're showing is to the right of that graph. The reason why I'm doing that is because for this whole year, we've been talking about Abdul Malik seems to introduce everything. He's the one that introduces the Shahada. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, that there's only one God but God, Muhammad is a prophet, on the coins in 692. Right. He then puts them on the coins in 696, and then introduces them on the Dome of the Rock in 691 and 692, and he introduces them on the caliphal protocols. So he's the one that introduces Muhammad, he's the one that introduces the Shahada, he is the one that also introduces the word Islam and the people called Muslims, and he is also the one that eradicates all of the images and replaces it with only script. Right. So once he now introduces the man, he then has to have the book.
Today we're going to talk about how the Hafs canonization was chosen, or how the Hafs reading that became basically the standard reading for the so-called 1924 Cairo edition was chosen.
This we do know. Gabriel said Reynolds talks about this. Also, Angelica Neuwirth and Nicholas Sinai. They go and they give the history of how the Hafs was chosen, and they go back to 1924. Now, remember, the Ottoman Empire still existed up until 1924. So the Ottoman Empire were the ones that controlled the Muslim world, but they're in Egypt. In Cairo especially, they were having problems. And remember, this was under the British protectorate at that time. But the British did not control Islam. And I know a lot of Muslims have come back to me and says, you don't know what you're talking about because the British were in charge of Cairo. That's true, politically speaking, but not religiously. And the religious context versus the politics were two different categories. So here in Cairo, they were having a problem. Because according to what Reynolds says, and Neuwirth, and also Sinai, the educational authorities were putting standardized tests in the high school there in Cairo, just the city of Cairo, and they were coming up with many different answers whenever they talked about the Quran. And, of course, they wanted to have standardized tests. What are you going to do when you have a multiplicity, in this case, 30 different answers when they ask for a certain verse and for them to recite a certain verse? So they went to the Al-Azhar University, which right. is considered to be the greatest university, theologically speaking, certainly not scholastically speaking, but theologically speaking, in the Muslim world. And they went to a man whose name was Muhammad ibn Ali al-Huzaini al-Haddad, who was one of the teachers there, and they asked him, could you choose one of these 30? At that time, there were 30 official ones. They were getting 30 different answers from all these students. And so he was the one that had a committee, but he was the one that came up with the answer, and he was the one that chose Hafs. Now, why did he choose Hafs? Well, it looks pretty clear, because the Ottomans considered Hafs to be the authoritative one, and the Ottomans, who were still in power, at least theologically speaking, though they were not in control of Egypt, they were, theologically speaking, they were the ones that had always had Hafs at the beginning. So he chose Hafs, which was standardized, which became the standard text for all of the schools in just one city, Cairo. So what did they do with the other 29? They grabbed them all up, accumulated them all, took them out into a boat, and threw them into the Nile River, thinking that that would solve the problem. They've thrown them out.
Just like Uthman thought.
Yeah, Uthman just burned them, thinking that that would solve the problem. As far as the different dialects, you want to get back to one dialect. You want to get back to, in this case, the Kufan dialect. Uthman wanted to get back to Qurayshi dialect. Now they're getting back to the Kufan dialect, getting rid of all the others, including many of the Qurayshi Qurans.
Right.
So with this happening in 1924, this was very successful. The Hafs one is not alone. Take a look at these here. There's 7 different Hafs. Each one of those that you see in that picture is a Hafs Quran, a Hafs Qiraat. So even the Hafs, we're not even sure which one is the one that he wrote, because we don't have the original manuscript from 796. Now, he was chosen in 1924 for just the city of Cairo. And I have to keep reminding Muslims that just for one city. But that became so successful because now all the standardized tests were all giving the same answers. So in 1936, and there were some, I have to be careful because we do know that there were some changes even to the Hafs between 1924 and 1936. But in 1936, the Egyptian government, seeing how successful this had been for the city of Cairo, decided to make the Hafs text standard for all of Egypt.
Right.
Now it's the year that King Farouk came to power, so they named it the Farouk edition. And it was a little bit different than
1930s.
1930s, he came to, yeah. And so they named it after him. So that was now only for this country of Egypt, 1936. In 1985, King Fahd, who came to power in 1982, he decided in 1985 that looking and seeing that the Egyptian model was so successful, and what they did in Cairo was so successful, he said, well, let's do the same thing. So he went to his scholars and said, I want you to name the Hafs text to be the official text. 1985, we're talking about what? We're talking about 35 years ago. Now, hold on a minute. Remember Al-Bukhari, when he talks about how the Quran is put together? Remember that scenario where we looked and we saw that Hudayfa comes down from Azerbaijan and he's upset because he's heard about all these other different variants. He's heard about these other, and he's listened to other derivations of the Quran, and they are different dialects, and he says, we've got to make one Quran. He comes back and he insists that Uthman write just one Quran, and it must be the Qurayshi Quran. Remember all this? It's right there on the screen. You can see it in the Arabic on the right, and there you can see the English translation. I'm just kind of summarizing it. We've gone through this before, didn't we? Remember Uthman did that, and then he created that one Quran, and then he burned all the others. And what were the ones he burned? Well, he burned the ones from Basra and from Kufa and from Damascus. He burned them. Why? Because those were the corrupted Qurans. Those were the corrupted dialects. Those were the ones that were not the one Quran. And he retained only the Qurayshi dialect, right? So where was the corrupted Qurans from? Let's remind ourselves. Let's go back and let's look at this timeline. Remember, we talked about the 5 cities, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have Mecca, Medina, we have Basra, Kufa, and we then have Damascus. But hold on a minute. They were in black. We took the black away and we introduced the green again. Why? Because now you have the Quraysh. You have the Qurayshi text that is now in all of the 5 cities, the major 5 cities. Remember we talked about this. This is all review. So by 652, we now have all of the major cities, both in Iraq and in Syria, are now Qurayshi. That was hugely important.
Or at least that's the thought.
That's the thought.
Right.
And then we came up suddenly with these other Ubay ibn Ka'b's Quran, which then corrupted it again. And then you have Ibn Masud's Quran, and then you have Ibn Musa's Quran. And Zayd ibn Thabit, who we thought was corrupted, was back to the Qurayshi. So now really, we then come across this real problem, because then in the late 7th century, you have 3 other Qurans. They don't even have the same surahs. One, Ubay ibn Ka'b's has 116 surahs. Ibn Masud has 110, possibly 111 surahs. And Ibn Musa, though he has 114, his is not the same Quran that you have from Zayd ibn Thabit's that's there in Mecca. So even at the end of the 7th century, we're now getting through some corruptions here.
Yeah, you have Basra, Kufa, Damascus.
Basra, Kufa, and Damascus, which are up at the top. So that we talked about, and we said that these are the corrupted Qurans. That's why we have them in red. However, here's the conundrum. Amongst these 10 readers, these are the 10 readers that we've always talked about, how many of them are Qurayshi? Should we see? Well, let's look and see how many of them Qurayshi. Well, you have Nafi from Medina. You also have Ibn Kathir. He is from Mecca, so he would be Qurayshi. And then back down here, you have Abu Ja'far from Medina. So those are the 3, which means only 3 of the 10 readers were Qurayshi. Only 3 of the 10 readers were Qurayshi. What about the transmitters? Remember the transmitters in purple there? How many of them would be Qurayshi? Well, you would have Qalun, he would be Qurayshi, not Warsh. And then you would have Al-Bazi would be Qurayshi.
Yeah.
And then you have Qunbul could be Qurayshi. You would have also Isa ibn Wardan would be Qurayshi. I'm circling them in green. And Ibn Jumaz. Which means only 5 out of the 20 are Qurayshi. All told thus of the 30 official Qiraat, only 8 use the Qurayshi dialect. Only 8. 22 of them were not Qurayshi.
So Uthman's project failed miserably.
And look at Hafs, circled in black. He is not Qurayshi. He is from Kufa. He is from the stable of Asim. What's more, his dialect from Kufa was one which Uthman burned. So,
which many even accused of being untrustworthy. You know,
a liar.
Confused.
He did
liar.
not have. He created narrations where he wanted to. He tried to make his stronger than it should have been.
That's right.
So can you see, he is not only the wrong person, he is also from the wrong place, the wrong city. He is also from the wrong dialect, the corrupted dialect. And more than that, the only reason he was chosen was because the Ottomans had chosen him. And the only reason we can think of that anybody's come up why the Ottomans have chosen him is because he's the easiest to understand.
Why wouldn't they choose Ibn Kathir from Mecca? Why wouldn't they choose Nafi' from Medina?
Here's and this is the one that I really have a problem with. Why in the world did King Fahd choose a Kufan? when King Fahd, of all people from Saudi Arabia, should have chosen one of his own dialects. For heaven's sakes, he had 8 to choose from. 3 of them from the readers. Why? Whoever was telling him which ones to look at, what they were doing, and contexting, looking into the background, they should have at least have gone to the Qurayshi dialect. They should have been the first to have said, we want a Qurayshi, we want a Medinan, we want a Meccan, we want Ibn Kathir or Nafi, or at least Abu Ja'far.
Well, in defense of King Fahd, he would have relied on the advice of the religious authority.
And the religious authorities should have known their own traditions.
Right.
They should have been aware of what we're aware of. And they should have known you do not go to Kufa, you do not go to Basra, you do not go to Damascus. Listen, if they weren't good enough for Uthman, then why are they good enough for King Fahd? Proving that King Fahd was not very religiously adept. It looks like the Saudi Arabians, that would have been a coup for them to go back to one of their own dialects, and yet they chose a dialect that was corrupted hundreds of miles away, and in this case, at least 100 years too late.
Yeah. Possibly next episode, we are going to walk you through just a handful, a sample of some of these Qiraat issues to show you, especially if you're a Muslim, why these variant readings do not state that it's the same Quran. There are theological issues, there are linguistic issues, among other issues that we will be revealing to you.
We did this because we were hearing the same recurring narrative. Okay, so there are differences, but they don't change any theology, they don't change any belief, they don't change any practice, they don't change any doctrine. Now, you're hearing Shabir Ali say this all the time. That's his only caveat. He has to fall back on that because he's now admitted as of May 19 that there are changes. But he says, who cares? There's nothing that's different. They're all saying the same thing. It's just different ways to say the same thing. Different pronunciations, different, as he says, recitations of saying the same thing. We're going to show you that that's not the case. Let's go right into it, and let's look at the first one. Let's go up on the screen, and let's bring the slide up, and that's chapter 2, verse 58. Always on the left in the green will be Hafs, and then on the right in the yellow will be Warsh or Nafi, or what it will give different ones. But most of them are Hafs versus Warsh.
And the reason why we're focused on Hafs, because it's the standard 1924 Quran.
And everything must be measured against that standard. So on the left side, you have Nakfiru. Actually, I'll let you do the Arabic, okay? You do the whole Arabic, and you go ahead and say. Now, just for those who are not initiated to this, look at the text that's in Arabic and look at the little green line. That is the word we're looking for in the Arabic. In the case with the Warsh, look at the little yellow line, and then we'll give you the translation, and then we'll give you the context and show you what it looks like in the sentence, and then we'll give you the significance.
Very good. I'm going to read just the word because I want people to focus on how it's pronounced. So for Hafs, the one on the left in the green, here is how it reads, the one underlined in green. Naghfir, naghfir. The one on the right side, Warsh, yughfar, yughfar. I say it slowly because I want you as non-Arab speakers to notice the difference. Naghfir versus yughfar. Does that sound the same to you? Of course not. Now let's get into the issue. You see the translation right there.
Just before you do that, if you can really look closely at the one, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. Notice the dot is above the line, so that's the noon that we've talked about earlier. And then the one on the right, the 2 dots below the line.
That's the ya.
That's the ya. There's the Y.
That's
so
right.
there is a difference in dots. 1 dot above versus 2 dots below. Also, notice that there's a fatha there above the na, whereas the one on the Y, there is a dhamma. So you have not only a dot difference, you also have a vowelization difference.
Right. And here's what's going on. I mean, linguistically speaking, the one in the left, Hafs, in the green, the verb here is in the active. The one in the right side, the yellow, it's in the passive. Okay? There's a difference between active and passive.
And one more thing, take a look at the second half of that word. Under that fa, there's a kasra on the with the Hafs side. When you look at the Warsh, it has been changed to an alif. I'm sorry, it's been changed to a fatha. So here you can see the 2 vowels are different as well there. So there's 2 vowelization differences and there's 2 dots differences.
Yeah. Now, as an Arab speaker, as someone who comes from a Muslim background, then I challenge my Muslim friends now to look at this and tell me, you believe that Allah is the one who's speaking. Okay, so maybe in Hafs we can see that he's the one who's speaking and saying he's the one, even though he's describing himself in the plural, by the way. Instead of saying aghfir in the singular, he's talking in the plural. And some of our Muslim friends say, well, this is the majestic plural, whatever. Naghfir, okay, so it's Allah is the one who is forgiven in the active, basically. In the right side, the warsh, just saying, shall be forgiven. Yughfar lahum. Who's going to forgive him? I can see Allah here in this. Somebody can forgive him.
Anybody can forgive. So
exactly.
Who does the forgiving here?
The
Where
people,
is the action taking place? That has a theological difference. You can write up on quite a bit on this. Just saying, if warsh is correct, then of course we can pretty throw God out of it. If hafs is correct, then it is obvious that this is God. Whether or not it's singular or plural, that's in and of itself another difficulty. But the fact that they are difference in context here shows the significance that we got a difficult knowing. The difficulty is we don't want to know who does the forgiving here. Where's the action coming from?
And in a religion like Islam, you have to know who's going to do the forgiveness.
Okay, let's go to another one. This is chapter 2, verse 140. On the hafs, go ahead and say the word.
Okay, once again, I'm going to read it slowly. Hafs, left side, taquluna. Taquluna. The one on the right side, warsh, yaquluna. Yaquluna.
There you have a T versus a Y.
That's right. The one on the left, you have the ta, 2 dots at the top. The one on the right, you have the ya, 2 dots at the bottom. So, here is the English. It's very clear. One is saying, you say.
Which is second person.
Right. The other one saying, they say.
Which is third person.
In the third person. Don't tell me it's revealed from heaven in both ways. There is a huge difference here between who is being referenced here.
And remember, on the one on the left, the hafs, the you is plural.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating because that would even in and of itself would have difficulty as to which you are you talking about here.
Absolutely. So in Hafs, for instance, let's say this is what Allah told Muhammad to tell the people. He's talking to somebody right now saying, you say, like right now I'm talking to you. Versus Warsh, he's talking about people in the past were saying something like that. He's regurgitating,
so it's present versus past again.
Exactly.
As well.
Repeating something that happened in the past.
Okay, fascinating. I mean, we could go on and on and on. Let's go to another one. Here is chapter 2, verse 184. Go ahead and give the Arabic.
Now, this is really one of my favorite, actually. I think I did a show during Ramadan with Hatun about this. So the Hafs reading on the left, the one in green, it says, miskeen, miskeen, singular. Miskeen, one poor person, by the way. And I'll tell you right now theologically why that's important. Warsh on the right side, masakeen, masakeen. Once again, miskeen versus masakeen. Now, if you don't know Arabic, you may feel like, oh, it may sound the same. No, one singular, that's Hafs, one plural, that's Warsh. Here is the theological
Before we
issue.
get into that, I just want people who don't speak Arabic, who don't recognize it, can you look and see the green line versus the yellow line? Can you see that there are the vowelizations are completely different? You have a kasra on the left side, and you notice that the line below is not there. It's above now. There's a slash above there. That is the fatha, which is above the ma. And it's also followed by a dagar aleph.
The dagar aleph is what allows me to use the masakeen. That's where the dagar aleph comes in handy. Exactly.
Okay, so there you can see one is one poor person, the other is many poor people. The significance, go ahead.
And I would say, initially when it was written, it didn't have any of these dots or diacritical marks. So which way was it revealed? Which way was it memorized? Miskeen or masakin? Now, this is a classic example, by the way. When they wrote it, they didn't know, was it plural or was it singular?
Well, it would have a huge significance as to who you're to give people to. What you're supposed to give during the time of Ramadan.
Yeah.
If it's just one person, that's not much you have to. If it's a whole slew of people, that would be a difference in practice. So when Shabir Ali says there is no difference in practice, no difference in belief, no difference in doctrine, here is a classic example of a difference in practice.
And I want to reiterate what Jay just mentioned. We're talking about a religion of works, and this is one of the 5 pillars of Islam.
There you go.
Right? So that's a crucial pillar. And what the context here is saying, if you couldn't fast because you're sick, right? You couldn't fast. So what is the alternative? You feed a poor person, for every day you cannot fast to earn righteousness on account of doing this. Do you feed one person or do you feed more than one? By the way, the plural in Arabic means at least 3. At least 3.
Oh, so it has to be 3 or more.
Yeah, because
so,
there's dual in
So not
Arabic.
only is there a difference in practice, there's also a difference in doctrine.
That's right.
Because this will affect your barakah, how much barakah you receive.
Exactly. You receive barakah from 3 people at least or more, or 1 person only.
Now, can you see, why are we bringing this up? Because we get the same repetitive narrative. There is no difference in practice. There is no difference in belief. There is no difference in doctrine. This is a good one to show you in all 3
This verse
cases.
shot the whole argument.
There you go. Let's go. We'll do one more, and then we'll take a break, and we'll come back and do another series, because I can see these are, you can unpack this, you can go so far for this. Let's go through chapter 2, verse 219. Go ahead and give the hafs on the left, and then we'll do the warsh on the right.
So, hafs on the left, kabirun. Warsh on the right, kathirun.
So one has a ba on the left, and the other one has a tha, 3 dots above.
Exactly.
1 dot below versus 3 dots above.
Which indicate, by the way, when it was written, didn't have these dots, and they didn't remember maybe which way it was read. Who knows? I mean, it's left the door open. And don't tell me as an Arab speaker that the word kabir means kathir. No. Kathir, when you're talking about plenty of things, many things. Kabir, it could be great, it could be giant, it could be big. Big difference between the 2 meanings.
Okay. So is drinking wine and gambling a great sin, or is it plenty of sin?
And once again, theological speaking, a great sin requires a different way to be atoned for. And ithmun kathir, meaning you sin a lot or multiple sins. Now which way you handle this?
Okay. So in one case it's size, the other case is volume. So you can see, I mean, you could go on and do the significance of this as far as practice and also as far as doctrine.
And in Islam, as you know, Jay, I'm sure you heard this, they classify sins. You have major sins, minor sins.
Okay.
So,
Terrific
I mean,
stuff.
which one does it apply here? I'm going to read the one on the left, hafs in green. وَيُكَفِّرُ. The one on the right, warsh. وَنُكَفِّرُ. There is sukoon.
So one is a Y, the other is a noon.
Right.
One has 2 dots below the line, and the other has 1 dot above the line, above the letter.
So you can see, right, just by looking at the English translation, one in a singular, hafs is saying he will remove, he will forgive, he will expiate your sins, basically. And the one on the right, warsh, we will remove. So who's the one who's doing the action in hafs?
Yeah, can you imagine we could remove our own sins? I mean, just the doctrinal, theological problems with this. It would be nice if I could be the one who is responsible for expiating my sins. But according to Hafs, it's very clear that God can do this. According to Wash, it looks like we can do this ourselves. That not only is a practice, that not only is a doctrine, that is a teaching that is different. I would love to see how Muslims are going to suggest that this is nothing more. This is nothing more than insignificant difference in pronunciation. This has theological ramifications, absolutely. Let's go to the next one. Chapter 3, verse 79, and this is Hafs on the left, Warsh on the right.
Okay, Hafs on the left. تعلمون. The one on the right, Warsh. تعلمون. Now this is fascinating to me. I tell you why. When you say تعلم or تعلمون, you're teaching someone about something. Here, the word is al-kitab, which is, taken as, let's say, scripture. So when I teach you the scripture, I am transferring my knowledge to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The one on the right, Warsh, saying you have knowledge. You have knowledge, meaning it's speaking just about me. I'm the one who has the knowledge, but I'm not teaching it to you.
That's right. There's a huge difference between teach and knowing
Exactly.
something. A teacher is much more advanced. Someone who just knows it is somebody on their own.
Right.
So the significance here is, do believers either teach the book or do they simply know the book? Everybody, a lot of people can know a book, but to teach it, that's a lot more advanced. There's the practice difference. There would be a theological, well, not so much a theological, but certainly as far
discipleship, impact, and everything else, and even evangelism and sharing the news about this kitab. Let's say the Quran, maybe.
Especially the Quran, because supposedly these are religious books. Chapter 3, verse 83, on the Hafs and the Warsh. Now here are 2 different words within the sentence that are different on both cases. So for those who are looking at visually, we look at the lines, the green lines on the left, and then look at the yellow lines on the right.
So I'm going to start with the first word at the top, in green in Hafs, يبغون, يبغون. I would correspond it now with the
and
one.
that is they seek.
Right. The one on the left, on the right side, Warsh. Next to that Allah word in red, تبغون, تبغون.
And now it's you seek. One is third person, the other one is second person.
Right. Now, the word at the bottom on Hafs, the one on the left side, يرجعون, يرجعون. And the one on the right, ترجعون, ترجعون.
Again, third person versus second person.
Now, one quick observation is Hafs is talking about somebody, some group of people. Maybe they're not present at the moment, could have been in the past. Where Warsh is talking about someone in the present time, right now, maybe even in the audience that the person is speaking to.
It's interesting if we could pull back and look at some of the verses that precede it, we will note that this is all using third person up until this point. So Hafs is probably more correct in this. In the case of Warsh, it just suddenly changes to second person. So there is a disconnect between the verses that precede it in the Warsh context, and they shouldn't really have kept it to the Y, the Ya, the Yur Ja'una, rather than going to the Tur Ja'una.
Yeah, and because Hafs is giving us a report about a different group of people, where Warsh is giving us a report about the people right here, right this moment. People maybe that, let's say, Muhammad was talking to. They're the one who basically will be returned. They're the one who are seeking to know the deen, the religion of Allah. Where in the left, Hafs is talking about other groups, other people, other nation.
Okay, so let's go to chapter 6, verse 115. Go ahead, the Hafs on the left and the Warsh on the right.
So, Hafs, kalimatu, kalimatu, Warsh, kalimatu, kalimatu. Notice the difference. Now we see the dagger alif. That's why I extended it. Kalimatu. Now this is another one of those that are interesting. Kalimatu is singular. One word. Maybe we're talking about the word of Allah, which it says, kalimatu rabbika. Where the other one, Warsh, is saying kalimatu, meaning more than one word.
And here, you notice the example we gave before, we saw an error with the Warsh. In this case, I believe we're seeing an error with the Hafs. Because you have the word singular, but then later down, it has kalimatu, and it goes to actually a plural form. In the case of the Warsh, it keeps it plural both times, proving that the two agree. Not the case in the Hafs. They don't agree.
Right, because Hafs could be talking about a specific verse or a specific command out of the many, words that were given. Where Warsh is saying, all of this is the word of Allah. All of it.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that would have a theological problem, especially for the Hafs, and yet the Hafs is the one that is chosen. So here we're finding back to back a problem with the Warsh to begin with. Now we find a problem with the Hafs to end it. Let's go on then to another one. This is chapter 7, verse 161.
All right. The one in the green, Hafs on the left.
Warsh in the yellow.
Hafs naghfir, naghfir. And the one in the yellow, tughfar, tughfar. So one in the we shall forgive, basically, and the other one, tughfar, passive. Your sins will be forgiven by somebody, by somebody. The one in Hafs, the speaker is the one who's saying, I will forgive. Where in Warsh, someone is going to do the act of forgiveness.
So, does Allah forgive our sins, or are they automatically forgiven? There is a theological problem here if you're going to have one or the other. Who does the forgiving, Allah or another source?
And here's another problem. Now, people can see a second word now. On Hafs it's here, khati'atikum, singular, one basically particular sin. Where in Warsh it said khati'atukum, plural. You can say all of your sins. So which sin are we talking about? One particular sin?
Or all
of your sin?
And of course, the volume has a difference in context of the volume of which how many are required here. That's fascinating because that would have a theological implications as well.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go to chapter 9, verse 66, Hafs. And now we're going away from Warsh. We're going to Ibn Kathir, who is, again, Hafs is nothing more than a narrator. Ibn Kathir is a reader, so he is one of the 10. And this should be Quraishi dialect. So the Quraishi should be on the left. This should be nothing more than a Kufan dialect on the left. Kufan dialect on the left, Quraishi dialect on the right.
And by the way, the Ibn Kathir words are the ones on the margin. You can see them, and they're underlined in yellow.
Look where the yellow marks are. This is not that's the Hafs in the middle, but in the major text. But this is what they've done here is they've shown the variant in the margin parts
between Hafs and Ibn Kathir. Hafs in the green, na'fu, and the way Ibn Kathir read it, yu'fa. Again, one in the active, the speaker saying we will forgive, and one or we forgive, and one by Ibn Kathir, it's in the passive. You are forgiven, or someone else will be forgiving you, basically. And the same thing for the second word in Hafs. The second word in there, nu'adhib, we punish, or we will punish, versus how Ibn Kathir read it, the word in the bottom with the underline in yellow, tu'adhab will be punished. Who's doing the action of the forgiveness and the punishment here? Are we talking humans basically punishing people? Are we talking the prophet punishing someone? Are we talking the prophet is the one who's doing the act of forgiveness? Big difference.
Looks like the tense has been changed depending on who's doing the action on this one.
That's right.
Okay, chapter 10, verse 2. Here you have Hafs, and back to Warsh again.
Hafs on the left reads, لَسَاحِرٌ.
With the dagar alif included.
Exactly, and so we're talking about a singular person, a magician. Basically, that's his, let's say his office, And the one on Warsh is the action of the magician. لَسِحْرٌ, work of magic. So, what are we dealing with? The action itself, or the position, or the actor himself?
Yeah. So, when the word of God is revealed to a man, they are surprised. Is it that is this a man that they're surprised at, or is it the act itself? So you can see this changes the context. Not only does it change the context, but
I'll tell you why. Because if they're saying he is a magician, and let's say in the context here talking about Muhammad, did he perform anything that caused them to think this way?
Muslims do say that this is his work of magic.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's both magician and work of magic, depending on which way you're going to go to. So there is a confusion concerning whether it is a man or an action doing which is happening here. Go chapter 15, verse 8. You have Hafs on the left, and you have Warsh on the right.
Once again, we see similar styles here. Hafs reads nunazzilu, and this is in action in terms of we send down angels. Nunazzilu. So the speaker saying he's the one who has the authority to send down angels. Warsh reads it ma tanazzalu. Speaking of angels, so it seemed like the angels have the decision to make to come down, basically.
So who is the one that actually creates the action? Is it God himself or the angels themselves? Again, that could have a lot of theological implications concerning what is who is under which authority. Let's go to chapter 18, verse 36, and here you have Hafs and you have Warsh again. In this case, it has to do with a singular versus a plural.
Yeah, so Hafs minha, which is basically in a singular, better than this. It's making a comparison here. And minhuma, Warsh reads it in a dual. Now, people don't know that in a Semitic language like Hebrew, like Arabic, you can distinguish between a singular, dual, and plural. That's why I was saying...
Dual means two.
Two, exactly. So you have a way to identify if you're speaking to two persons, one person, or three or more.
Three or more.
This is significant because Warsh is specifically talking about two things. It's better than two of them, both of them here, where Hafs is saying it's better than a particular one. So once again, we're talking about a religion that depends on work. If it is better than two things, what are these two things?
Yeah. Where is it? And that's fascinating because it looks like the Warsh, when he wrote that, he was not thinking of the context on that.
That's right.
Case. Chapter 19, and this will be the last one we're going to look at before we go and do some more comparisons of Hafs and Warsh. But I want to just look at this last one. This is chapter 19, verse 77. Hafs on the left, and now we have Khalaf on the right. They are both narrators. They are both what we call rawis.
Yeah, so speaking of someone who rejected the words of Allah and saying, that I will, be given wealth and a child, وَوَلَدًا, in a singular, where Khalaf says basically وَوُلْدًا in a plural, wuldan in a plural. Now somebody might argue and say, well, no, it still means the same. That's fine. It doesn't sound the same, at least. Waladan, clearly singular. Wuldan, okay, maybe it is a specific dialect that read it this way, but now if you don't know about that dialect, you can assume it's talking about more than one.
Okay, and here's another case where it depends on the context as to what the theological implications will be for the person who receives it.
Right.
And I think the reason we're doing this, and that'll be the last one. Let's just go back and think this through. The reason why we're introducing this is because of the claims that the Muslims make, especially people like Shabir Ali and Dr. Yasser Qadi. No, this doesn't change any meaning. This doesn't change any belief. This doesn't change any practice. This doesn't change any doctrine. As we've seen in almost every one of these examples. We've only given, I think, about 14 out of 93,000 that we could do. We can just keep on adding more and more and more and more. As we do more, as we get into it, as we actually unpack them, we're going to find huge differences between that. The fact that we are looking at them seems to suggest that either Shabir Ali hasn't done his homework, or Yasser Qadi haven't done their homework, or they're not even aware of this.